Hi everyone, in this video we're gonna see 10 C++ tips for beginners. But before starting, I recommend you to watch my channel because every project you can see on the left side of the screen, namely in the Solution Explorer, has its own dedicated video on my channel, so I recommend you to watch it. So, the first tip, in my opinion, is to avoid index when not necessary. For example, suppose that what you want to do is to print a vector, this vector vec of five double values, or maybe in this case are some integers. Okay, as you can see, the usual practice is to write for size d I equals 0, I lower than vec size, and then increment I. We just want to print the element of the vector, so the index I is not pretty necessary. So I suggest you to instead do this. So for const, because we don't want to change any element in the vector, auto, because the compiler knows which type of variable it is. Then the reference we call element, for instance, column the vector vec, and then we can say std column cout element, and then if you prefer end line to get a new line. In this case, as you can see, we're not using anymore the index I, but we're just saying iterate through every element in vector, and then you print out it. I chose the word element, but you can say any word you want. In this way, we can avoid using the indexes when not necessary. Now we can pass to the second tip, which is avoid using nested if-else when possible, of course. For example, we have three Boolean variables, which are is computer on, is password correct, and is YouTube open. As you can see, I say if the computer is on, if the password is correct, and if YouTube is open, then like the video and subscribe to Just Write the Code, to my channel. Else, this else is referred to is YouTube open, then else YouTube is not open, and so on. Instead, it's better practice to early return in case of mistakes. So for example, if the computer is on is our first check, so let's say if not computer is on, so if the computer is off, then in this case we can immediately write the computer is off. If you keep the Alt button pressed and then with the arrows you can move your line. So if computer is on, in this case is not computer on, so is off, then we see out computer is off, and then we return, and then we're done. If we can pass this if, we just need to check if the password is correct. So if not is password correct, then you keep this, you press Alt and you move the line, and then return. So password not correct, and then return. And finally, if not YouTube open, always the same procedure. YouTube is not open, and then you return. If you have passed through all these if successfully, then you print like the video and subscribe to Just Write the Code, and then we're done. As you can see, it's a lot more readable than using too many nested if-else. Okay, we can pass to the third tip, which is be careful with maps. In this case, for instance, we initialize our map with key1 as a string and the object which is an integer. So key1 1 and key2 2. Let's say we want to do something is if the value is different. If is different from 10. So let's say if map of key2 is equal 10, then we see out cannot be 10, and then we do something. Instead, if the value is 10, we immediately print the error and we return. But suppose that we by mistake we get map of key 3, which is not included in our original map, but we have to learn that the square bracket, if key 3 is a key that doesn't already exist in the map, it will insert a new object in the map. Of course, the object will be an integer and will be default initialized. Of course, in this case, the integer is not initialized by default at 10, so we do something in this case. So it's better to, if you know that you don't want to modify this value, it's better to say map at and then you insert the key. So if map at key2 equal 10, then you print the error. In this way, if you say map at key 3 at runtime, it will print a mistake telling you that key 3 is not present in the map. This is just to avoid mistakes that you're not considering. Now, the fourth tip: avoid using namespace standard. This is unfortunately a user practice to you do all your include blah blah blah, and then you say using namespace std outside every function, every main. It's not good practice because mainly by two reasons. Because in this way you are downloading all the std namespace, which might be heavy and unnecessary. And then because if you are working in a group, for example, if you put user namespace on the header file, for example, then I don't know it, and in the CPP file I still write the std string, which is not good. So there are two things that you can do better, which are or moving the user namespace std inside a specific function, so you only using that namespace inside the function, or even better, inside the function, if you know that you are just going to use, for example, in this case, the std string and cout, you can just say using std string and then using std cout. So you don't need to write std column inside the function, but at the same time you're not downloading all the namespace std. So I think this is a good tip. Fifth tip: the const reference. If, for example, in a function you need to pass as input a vector or string, which might be heavy, a heavy variable type, if you don't need to modify the string vector inside or any vector inside the function, you can put const, so the C++ knows that you're not going to modify it, and you can pass it as a reference. So you don't C++ doesn't need to create a copy every time this function is called, but you just pass it as a reference. This is to avoid using too much space and to save some space. Okay, the sixth tip is to use a single line when using if. For example, Suppose that you have this integer a, and you say if the input boolean variable is positive, then a is equal to, otherwise is equal minus 2. I mean, I know that this is just a stupid example, but it can be useful. Instead of doing this, you can comment this, Ctrl K, Ctrl C, and then you say a equal to is positive. If yes, 2. Otherwise, column minus 2. In this way, this line is the very same of this if-else, which is, I think, a lot more readable, and it saves a lot of lines. You can do it on a single line. You can read it as a question. If a is positive, yes, then a equal to, otherwise equal minus 2. Okay, we can pass to the seventh tip, which is use an order map. If you're, as in this case, you're declaring a map for strings and double, but you don't need to use the alphabetical order, because the map insert all the elements in alphabetical order. So if you don't need this order, you can use unordered map instead of map. So it's a good practice, even if it's not a lot used, and it's the very same. But the worst case I don't remember the name, is the average case is n log n instead of n squared, so it's even faster, and it's not really used, but it can save a lot of time sometimes. Of course, in the cases you don't need to save the map in some specific alphabetical order, in this case a string, or in numbers order if you have, for instance, some integers here. Okay, now we can pass to the eighth tip, which is define number as variables. For example, suppose that this function is given as the input the radius of a circle, it returns the area. Here you have this magic number, let's say, which is pi. For example, but it's good practice to save it as a variable. For instance, you can say double pi equal to 3.14159, and then here you say pi. This is because if you have this number in more points in more lines of the code, if you change this, for example, suppose is I don't know, integer number of simulations, which is 100, and then you use this number a lot of time inside your code. If once you want to change this value to 1000, so you just need to change once and not for every time you write it in the code. So it's again good practice to use magic numbers as variables. Now the ninth tip is index outside the for loop. For example, if you need to save the index even outside the for loop, for example, you want to say when you are breaking the for loop, so you can. Bad practice is to create a variable outside the for loop, and inside the for loop you assign to this variable the index value I. Otherwise, you can do is initialize the I outside the loop, so size the I equals 0. Then here you just write nothing, so for, then you directly pass to I lower than vec size plus plus I, and here if the condition is true, then break. So here the index I already exists. You don't need a new variable to save it. So it's again good practice to avoid space wasting using a new variable. In this case it's just an index, so it's not heavy, but in some cases you can avoid this repetition of unuseful size_t variables. And finally, the last tip is be careful with plus plus, because, for example, if you have this vector double, there is a lot of difference if, for instance, we create a variable size_t, or better, double v of I++, we call it A, or we have a new variable b, which is equal to v of ++i. In this case, so if we comment this line, I is equal 1, and here, sorry, we have to return 8, okay. Just an example. In this line, you have the index I, which is 1, then here you have A, which is v of I++. If you say I++, then I write it as a comment. In this way, A is equal of v of 1, which is 2 in this vector, and then I is equal to 2. Otherwise, if you have first you do the what you're going to do, and then you increment the variable. You assign to the variable a v of I, and then you increment I++. Otherwise, in this case, b is first you increment I, so you have I is equal to 2, and then b is equal to 2, v of 2, of course, which is 3, and then I still equal to. So you can see a lot of difference, because with I++, first you assign the value, and then you increment I. In this case, first you increment I, and then you assign the value to b. I hope that this tutorial was useful for you. I thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel and keep watching my videos, and see you in the next tutorial. Thanks for watching.